The one element I believe is key to the success of any diet is satiety. If you are not satiated, then the likelihood with the environment that we live in, you're probably going to fail. The restrictive nature is just setting you up for a rebound, and that's why you see the chronic yo-yo dieters. All the evidence says if you restrict without intelligence and application, then you are setting yourself up for a bigger weight gain.
Today's guest is Wade Lightheart, a 3-time Canadian natural bodybuilding champion, co-founder of BIOptimizers, and one of the world's leading authorities on natural nutrition, supplementation, and training methods. Today, Wade and I discuss why most people today are sick, the principles that make all healthy diets work long-term, the critical importance of magnesium, and how to keep yourself at peak performance into your 80s and even 90s.
In North America, it's almost impossible to get sufficient levels of magnesium. And I call magnesium the miracle mineral. It's involved in over 600 functions in the body. It's essentially a catalyst to enzyme function, electrolyte regulation, neurotransmitter formation, vasodilation, the relaxation response in both your nervous system and your muscles. It's huge, its impact. And if you're deficient, everything starts to slow down like you don't have enough electrical juice.
Hey Fit Fathers, this is your official invitation to come to our first ever conference called Fit Father, Fit Mother Live. Join us in August 2025 for 3 transformational days designed to help you overcome one of life's greatest obstacles, staying consistent and motivated with your health amidst the challenges of life. At Fit Father, Fit Mother Live, we're bringing together world-class health experts to help you become more focused, more disciplined, and take your results to the next level. Day 1 of the event focuses on mindset and mental health, because as you know, real change starts in your mind. We'll give you strategies to reduce stress and unlock greater discipline, motivation, and mental clarity. Day 2 focuses on physical health and longevity. You hear from top doctors and experts on the latest methods to speed up your fat loss, build muscle, enhance your longevity, and overcome obstacles like nagging injuries. Day 3 is all about the power of community and accountability. You'll make real connections with like-minded fit fathers and fit mothers who will become your friends and support you long after this event ends. We'll also have dozens of top-tier health companies on-site as vendors, showcasing the latest products, technologies, and innovations to support your health journey. This is so much more than just a conference. This event is your chance to connect with your fellow fit family, to recharge your batteries on an unbelievable wellness vacation, and take your fitness results to the next level. Don't miss out on the best fitness event of 2025. Register now at fitfatherproject.com/2025 to secure your spot today. All right, friends, welcome back to another episode here on the Fit Father and Fit Mother Project podcast. I am joined by an old and dear friend of mine, Wade Lightheart. He is many things: a champion natural bodybuilder, a health educator with decades of experience, and a co-founder of BIOptimizers, which is one of the greatest supplement companies in the world that focuses on developing world-class digestion products that end up improving your energy systems in your life and your longevity and your performance. So Wade, thank you for coming on to the show. I'm excited to have a deep conversation. And as we get into these many topics, talking about the importance of micronutrients like magnesium, your take on optimum diet for longevity, I'd love for you to share with us some of your origin story about why you basically directed your whole life around health and performance and muscle building and longevity. Why did this capture your heart?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. Great to be here. I grew up in Canada playing hockey and sports and living in a rural environment. And when I got 15, my sister was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, a form of cancer of the lymph nodes. And I watched her progress through the medical model over 4 years before she died at the age of 22. So having, at a formative part of my life, where you don't really think about death or you don't really think about illness, I had firsthand exposure to that whole journey that she went through. And it was a painful journey. And what I found was there was a tremendous amount of effort and energy put into this, but it didn't make sense to my 15-year-old, 16-year-old self. I would say, well, how come we're driving where she gets a treatment and then we have to stop 6 times on the way home for her to vomit because she's so sick and stays in bed for 3 days. I'm like, it looks like the treatment is worse than the cure. And it's kind of like, if I want to be healthy, wouldn't I do things to be healthy as opposed to interactions? And that's a very low resolution look at illness,
Yeah.
but it was the foundation of like, well, what, my health isn't a guarantee and my life isn't a guarantee. So, well, what do I need to do? And it started out, I thought if you could build a physically vital, like building muscles and, training and running and all these sort of things that were these externalized markers to health that would help. And there is some utility in that mindset. And I went to university to study exercise physiology. And so what I found is I got all this compartmentalized information. In other words, it was a great background, but I can remember going to my exercise physiology professor in my fourth year because I had tried a new form of training. It was very, very high intensity. And over the course of 4 months, I dropped my heart rate by about 10 points, like 10 beats a minute, which is a significant, it's actually a ginormous leap.
Especially for a fit guy.
Yeah. And I went to my professor and I said, well, here's what I've been doing. I'm not doing any cardio based training at this stage, but I've noticed this change. What do you think caused that change? And he did not have a decent answer for me. And I was like, I'm wasting my time here. If the guy in the Department of Exercise Physiology can't explain this to me or set me in the right direction, I need to go find people who are producing results. And so I exited university and just started finding people who are producing results. I continued on with my bodybuilding career, and I started working in virtually every single facet of the nutrition industry. So, as a represented athlete, and then I became, worked at a nutrition store and I worked at a gym and, eventually, started writing books and doing my own personal training and coaching. And then I started to see that there were patterns in types of people and what they needed to address and what happened. And then after the Mr. Universe contest in 2003, Matt and I started what is now today BIOptimizers. We were an education-based company, and I wanted to help people who are in the muscle building fitness world avoid, falling into the trap of just using drugs to get gains.
Yep.
And that led to the formation of our first product, which was Massons, a digestive health product 20 years ago. So, and eventually we moved into a highly educated-based premium nutrition brand, and it's a longer play to play that game. Most companies just do a white label fad type of product with very low resolution information from lab assays relative to, is it biologically active and effective? Can you demonstrate this? And so we decided that we built the best supplement company in the world that we could on a quality level, because we think that excellence always has its own rewards and that there's always a market for excellence. And that turned out really well. And now we're one of the premium brands in the space now 20 years later. So that was the journey. And I've always been fascinated with people. I love seeing people get more out of their lives. I love seeing people take iterations that change the trajectory, removes them out of pain and suffering, and moves them to what we call the new paradigm of health. And I believe firmly that, especially nowadays, that we can extend the quality of our life probably 20% more than its current level. I think that's a realistic objective. In other words, instead of just expiring at 80, you're expiring in 95. Yep. Or variants of that, but you're feeling really functional maybe up to that last year or whatever. And before the kind of cascade that seems to happen for people when they check out. And I've noticed the people I know that have lived long and healthy lives, they tend to be very functional, and then it's like, I don't know, like there's some theories that the death gene gets activated and there's just a cascade of failures across the system, and it's a quick exit and it's relatively painless. And I think that's the way to go.
For sure. Now, I think the perfect question off of that, based on your wide experience, is, and your love for people and observing the psychological, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of health, why are so many people struggling today? Like, we may have the worst cardiometabolic health we've ever had, despite having the most opportunity we've ever had. Like, how do you speak and discuss this gap between what's possible and the results most people are getting? Like, what are the problems, whether it's cultural, business in people's lives? Like, what's the real issue as you see it?
One of my spiritual teachers said something that's profound. I always go back to it. Environment is stronger than will. And inside of the United States, and I'll use some generational iterations to kind of give you an example. If you look at my grandfather, who went from wagons to rockets, literally, in his lifetime, the amount of physical labor that was involved in day-to-day activity in his early set a foundation of physical competency. Mm-hmm. Now, I look at, say, my father, who sort of grew up in that world, but then was part of the rapid expansion of technology. And technology means I'm talking from going from changing the channel to sitting in front of the TV all the time with a remote. Yeah. I'm talking about physical labor to non-physical social jobs. You know, I'm sitting in front of computers, the impact of light. And then the complete failures of our institutions who are supposed to guide, protect, and provide insights into what's healthy. So if we look at USDA, if we look at FDA, if we look at NIH, you know, because what the de facto thing that happens is, well, we're going to defer to an authorities. And I'm going to take one step further onto a family level. Yeah. Is when I was a kid, no cell phones, no communication. I think we were sent out after school and literally come home for dinner and then come home, go out again and come home at dark. So you had a foundation of physical activity as well as exploration and the building of confidence. Fast forward now, people have to have play dates. And a play date, there's a deeper element to this. The play date requires a authority inside of that to monitor the natural socialization of the kids who are playing. We had to you call Johnny Poopy Face and he punches you in the mouth and you talk to mom and you're like, well, I don't call people names. Okay, I'm going to correct that after. But you had that time to integrate. So what happened is now from early childhood, it's become not about my own autonomy and responsibilities that go with that. It's about, can I present a better case to some authority to get validation for my lack of socialization? That compiled with, I think, corrupt, what I would call, I think Peter Mackey called it crony capitalism. That we don't live in a crony capital. We live in a crony capitalism. It's not true capitalism. Is that we have agencies and corporations who are using the tool of regulations to keep certain people out of their business and to maintain a monopoly on the decisions. And then you have a revolving door between the corporate interests and the regulatory bodies. For sure. Now, this has proceeded over the period of, it wasn't all corrupt, but it's just gone over decades and decades and decades. And at the end of the day, if you look at other models, the more we spend on health, the sicker that we get. Our life expectancy is dropping. We have partnerships between the pharmaceutical and big agri that allows people to stay alive, but sick and dependent on iterations and the authorities. And as doctors spend a lot of time looking at very complex process that requires intense amount of study, research, effort, and competency. They are often hamstringed by the bodies that they are part of and what they can recommend or do. And secondary, they don't have enough time to really take the time to re-educate. So it's just standard, bring them in the office, cut them a prescription, move them out the door. The food industry in the 1970s, a guy by Eric Schlosser wrote a book called Fast Food Nation. And what happened is the conglomerations of big food companies realized that the cost of customer acquisition is the most expensive part in a business. And because there was only a few players left in the game because of the regulatory bodies, they were like, well, we can't actually get more market share. We're just going to trade market share and spend all this money, but not get anything back. So what we need to do is get people to consume more of our product who are already our customers. That's when the chemical industry started developing food mimickers. In other words, products that mimic nutrients and vitamins and things like that our bodies need it and would require and have a natural response to eat more of in a deficiency. And that would increase the amount that we would consume of this and that. And from that standpoint, that food science became perfected over the next couple of decades. and you saw the supersized products, you saw the bigger packaging, you saw higher levels of consumption from a caloric intake. So we have several things happening. One, we have a lack of autonomy in personal individuation. Second, we have a failure of the agencies that were put in place to regulate, bad actors in the industry through proper providing quality nutrition to people. And we have a massive reduction of physical activity. So someone like my father, when I say, hey, Dad, you're in your 70s now, it'd be good for you to go to the gym a couple times a week. He grew up in a mindset of world, well, I'll just go work outside. But it's like, right. And so the specifics that he might need, but he'll sit in front of his TV for 4 or 5 hours every night. And so there's a gap between living in the new world paradigm where we have to conscientiously book in active time in order to maintain our health. And we need active awareness about removing the tendency to overconsume products that throw our caloric model off, because at the end of the day, obesity is the number one contributor to every single disease there is. It's the big mitigator on all those things. And if you take that into effect, those three elements have created an environment, unless you are conscientiously seeking an expert such as yourself to guide the person specifically on what you can do, what you can't do, and that's customized to a lifestyle, to unique genetic and epigenetic components, then the likelihood that the person is going to succeed is almost zero, because the environmental influences are overwhelming to the individual who's got a regular job and a couple of kids and is running that lifestyle. So that's why I think the whole podcast space is so important, and is now we're seeing a new media landscape where experts who are actually living the life that we want to live, giving the information, as opposed to a governing body or a governing institution or something that can't address you, the unique individual, and where you're at. So I'm really excited about the future and where we're going, but that's, I think, the crisis has led to the awareness, and the awareness leads to the course correction, and I think we're well on our way to course correcting it now.
Honestly, brilliant start. I think that was about as good of a summary of the landscape that I was nodding my way through as I've heard. I completely agree. And I think there's this next layer on top of it, is we've had this mostly well-intentioned health industry that has then propagated a cyclical round of different kinds of diets and ideas that work well for some people and not for others. And now people have their own failure metrics and stories wrapped in all of that. So it can even feel confusing to start. Now, you just wrote a book along with your business partner that aims to address some of the through lines and principles behind all these diets that work. And I think that's where I'd like to go next, is talk about, there are people today who are achieving great results eating only ribeye steaks and eggs. And there are people today who are eating completely plant-based diets. And there is a unique individual component for sure, but there's also a through line of principles that work behind all good diets. And so from the context of someone who wants to maintain good body fat levels, but is not necessarily looking to be, a competitive bodybuilder, but someone who wants to have great energy and they want to live a long time, what are some of these common principles that we can agree upon as the true through lines that you've uncovered in your work that people can know? And we can talk principles and then tactics that come off those principles, but I would love to kind of get a little more of a unified theory of nutrition for longevity, if you will.
Yeah. So Matt, my business partner, is a keto guy, and I'm a plant-based guy. So we literally have been in this conversation for 20 years about how to overcome the dietary tribalism and the values and stuff. So what were some universal principles? One of the elements I think people have to look at, and we created a pyramid hierarchy of nutritional requirements. And at the bottom of that, we put spiritual, psychological, and emotional and social components. Mm-hmm. Food, in the consumption of food, is a highly social and cultural experience. And each individual has unique psychological and emotional built-in needs or tendencies related to that. So, for example, I grew up in, a hunting community. We hunted regularly for a living. We had farm animals and things like that. So those are common elements within the culture that I grew up. Being a vegetarian in that culture is virtually impossible from a social, emotional, psychological element. It's not going to work culturally. Okay. Even if it was the right diet for me. Now, conversely, you can go to a place like India. I just got back from India, which has the highest amount of vegetarians, I think, per capita in the world. And it's easier to be a vegetarian, but it's also very easy to be a diabetic. You have the highest rate of diabetes is the number one killer, but they have low cancer rates. So what's going on here? Well, the one element that I believe is key to the success of any diet is satiety.
Yes.
Okay, if you are not satiated, that means the feeling of fullness, that you're not in a craving mode, then the likelihood with the environment that we live in, unless you have just like moved off to a place where there's no access to anything, you're probably going to fail at some point. You might be able to hold that up for 3 months or 4 months, but oftentimes the restrictive nature is just steadying you up for a rebound. And that's why you see the chronic yo-yo dieters. All the evidence says that's a bad strategy. If you restrict without intelligence and application, then you are setting yourself up for a bigger weight gain. That's number one. Number two, I think recognizing now we have the ability to do this is you can look at your genetics and epigenetics and see which dietary strategy might be more effective for you. So when I look at the genetics of, say, my business partner, Matt, he does really well on fats and doesn't do as well on carbohydrates. I'm literally the inversion of that. I do really well on carbohydrates and not so well on fats. So based on that, a plant-based model can work very well for me, which would be a fail for him. And anytime that I attempted a ketogenic style for me, I just couldn't stick with it because it didn't make me feel good.
Yes.
Metabolizing the fats was harder to, and then, so that's that piece. These can be mitigated by, significant food evaluations. Like as you get into any dietary strategy, you can get into particular elements that, some people will do better on, lamb as opposed to chicken or there's all those nuances, but generally for the general person, satiety, food regularity, exercise, high levels of hydration, and concentrated deep breathing around energy. Those things are really powerful. Most people don't breathe. They sit down, so they're only getting 30% of their oxygen. Right? The lack of movement and lymphatic drainage from lack of exercise. Low muscle mass or decreasing muscle mass. Muscle mass is the metabolic mover. So you've got, by doing muscle building on a regular basis, those elements are going to lead more. And getting out into regular sunshine and reducing all of the dysregulatory lighting that we're exposed to. And there's some great doctors in the area that are talking about that much of the study research that's not applying to light, since everything's in the solar system, is we've got to recognize that even on a cloudy day, it's about 100,000 kilowatt power. And inside we're under some like energy saving light that's flashing at a frequency that doesn't make our cells work right. Reducing blue light at night that throws off sleep cycles because we're completely out of our sleep rhythms. All of those set up hormone cascades, hunger factors, routine of incorporating an exercise routine. And then I've found out recently as a dad, listen, I have to go to bed a little bit earlier and I have to get up a little bit early so I can get my exercise out of the way before the kids get up. Because with kids, this can be very dysregulating for scheduling, especially when they're young. And so you got to get ahead of those and set those priorities as my physical self is of importance. And then finally, and you could have put this first, is having a quarterback to guide you. We're bombarded by social media. And especially if you're not in your best physical condition and you want to work on it, what happens is the progress is probably not going to be as fast as you want or as easy as you think it might be. And what happens, you might be setting momentum and lifestyle habits that are going to lead you where you want to go, but you're bombarded by counter information, which is playing on the insecurities that you have, saying, well, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. Bob's just on a total keto diet, or Jordan Peterson's not eating anything but steaks. Maybe I should do that, and that lack of confidence is give you what we call the downward spiral of the efforts. You know what? Whatever. Okay, I'll hit the diet on Monday. It's Super Bowl weekend. I'm going crazy this week. It's Thanksgiving. Oh, it's another social. And then all of a sudden it's the end of the year. You had your yearly goals last year. And now instead of being in your best shape ever, you're another 10 pounds heavier than before. And you're further behind the 8 ball. And people can only handle so many of those strikes before they just give up. And the weight of the environment that we're living in has now led you to not hold those standards to yourself. So, and then I guess there's one other piece, going back to environment. You got to hang around the people that are producing the results that you want, that's their standard of life. If, like, I have a friend that's in the men's space, and, he would go in and out of fitness, and then he started hanging around with guys that fitness was a priority as fathers and husbands and all that sort of stuff. And within a very short period of time, not only was he at his best level, but his peers were at the best level, and they were holding each other accountable to that. Yes. And so having that culture around you and that's probably one of the upsides of CrossFit. The downside of CrossFit is that it can put people in an environment of competition that can be damaging. But the upside was the social component of the gym environment that had people going at each other and competing and creating a culture, because I think we've reduced the natural communications of humans on the socialization. When I used to go to the gym, 25, 30 years ago, everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, you knew everybody. It was a thing. Everybody knew it was a competition, competing. You're all friends. You're spotting each other. Now everybody's got the headphones on. Nobody wants to look at anybody else. And you lose that social component that I think is really, really powerful as a motivating influence to stay on target with your goals. So authorities, environment, satiety, and personal customization is the key.
How's your vitamin D looking these days? If you're like most people, it's probably not great. Studies show that over 45% of adults are deficient in vitamin D. Why? Because we simply don't get enough sunlight. Whether it's because long hours working indoors, living in cloudy climates, or covering up with sunscreen, our skin isn't soaking up those critical UVB rays like it used to. And here's the kicker. Low vitamin D isn't just about weak bones. It's linked to fatigue, depression, and even a weaker immune system. And that's where the MitoLux Sun Lamp comes in. MitoLux gives you your daily dose of sunshine right in the comfort of your own home. In fact, it's designed to mimic the best of the sun spectrum, including all those important UVB rays and infrared rays to help you naturally boost your vitamin D, serotonin levels, and even your hormones. It also doubles as a red light therapy device for skin anti-aging. Just 5 minutes a day on the MitoLux can give you up to 4,000 IUs of vitamin D, so you're on your way to feeling brighter, stronger, and more energized without worrying about the weather or harmful overexposure to the sun. Ready to light up your health? Head to mitolux.com and use promo code FITFAMILY10 for an exclusive 10% off your first lamp. MitoLux, get your daily dose of sunshine. I'm going to bring out some highlight points like you just did that really stood out for me. One certainly is on the diet that's going to work best for someone. Fundamentally, it fits cultural and family constraints. Like, it works within your social circle. And I had this epiphany, when you're married to somebody, you have a life partner, but you also have an eating partner. Like, this is the person you're going to be interfacing with, pretty much on dinners, for example, the rest of your life. So finding ways to create more harmony around that is always going to be a win. A diet that gives you satiety, energy, and good digestion, which would probably be the absence of digestive symptoms, absence of gas, bloating, stomach pain, anything where you have an intuition that something's not going there, you'll dial it in. We have the benefit today of nutrigenomic testing, which we may talk about more. But intuitively, Wade, you found your way to the diet that happens to support the genes that you have for the particular enzymes you have for a higher carb, better diet. So what I love is testing is available. That is great. Most people listening to this have not tested, but you can pay attention to your body and what's working. And gradually, even like subconsciously, we are steering ourselves on this health journey towards refining the things that really work well for us. Not to take away from nutrigenomic testing, but we're all kind of doing it through paying attention to feedback and energy levels and digestion. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, one of my bodybuilding coaches way back in the day, Scott Abel.
Yeah, Scott Abel was a coach of mine for one show too, as funny as that is.
Yeah, he was an absolute genius. And one of the things that he made you do is write down all the biofeedback. Were you tired? Were you energized? Did you feel bloated? What was your hunger levels? How was your sleep levels? All of these. He wasn't so concerned about the sets and reps of the movement. He was looking at the physiological response that you were at as a marker. Now, through that process, I continued on even after I was coaching with Scott, and we did some experiments on the plant-based performance side we kind of exhausted his repertoire, and he said, I don't know where we're going. And I kept that experiment going. He felt it was suboptimal for the bodybuilding community. And I said, well, based on current knowledge, probably is, but I don't think that should be a holdback for the future. And fortunate enough, I was able to certainly produce similar results on a plant-based diet, but I had to overcome a lot of different things. And I used that feedback model. And when I did get my genetics test, I remember the ND we were going over that. And she's like, it's pretty remarkable that like your diet is pretty concordant with like, it's about 95% on.
Exactly.
And I was like, yeah, but I want that extra 5%. And there were some nuances, particularly on vitamin uptake, that was very helpful for me that I couldn't see because I didn't know what I didn't know. I might have maintained those sufficiency forever.
Yeah. Your energy level is going to be a constellation of how well all these small metabolic processes that create a symphony. If one thing's not working well, there's backup pathways that can help support and catch. So until you do the testing, you don't know that exactly. So what tests are there any commercial tests that you like for like the metabolome or anything that you recommend and you have used?
Yeah. So I think, genetics tests vary from person to person. So, there's a lot of great ones out there. I'm not so concerned about that one, just as long as you have an ND that's familiar with genetics to be able to interpret the results that they're getting. And they usually have a favorite, but I think that's a good start. The other thing is the good old DEXA scan. DEXA scan is the best muscle, body fat, lean body mass or bone mass test that you can do easily, that's easily accessible in most major cities. Using that as a directional equivalent, does your exercise and nutrition supporting what you're doing or not? Like, for example, if you're on Ozempic and think, oh, wow, I'm dropping, 20, 30 pounds, but then you look, your lean body mass and your bone mass is dropped into the tank. Now you know that, people don't know this when they're taking, diet drugs. You might have a diet strategy or an exercise strategy. I'll give you another example. So I was training and I know I'm off topic, but just to point to that, after I did the Mr. Olympia 2 years ago, I decided I would go run a marathon and never ran a marathon before. And I just said, I'm going to eat to fuel my running. And even though I was training probably twice the amount of time that I was training for the bodybuilding contest before I ran the marathon 6 months later, I gained 13 pounds of body fat during that time because I didn't know how to eat like a marathoner. And it literally took me about a year to recalibrate that back to where I want it. So that's a sub-intuitive aspect that I didn't know. So I would go about it differently now if I decide to go run another marathon. But it was a learning experience, and I wanted that learning experience. Spectra cell tests I like for seeing how much of the vitamins and minerals that are getting inside of your system. That was very helpful for myself. For most people, I think a continuous glucose monitor is a must, especially if you want to lose body fat or you've struggled with that. Simply because the variability between your blood sugar and glucose response is radically different in people. I've seen people that can eat potatoes and they're fine. Another person eats potatoes and their blood sugar's through the roof. Like I could eat potatoes all day long. And my, my Irish Scottish eats is like eats in German. It is eat that stuff like nothing. But then you go maybe to say rice, my Japanese friends eats rice. Nothing happens. I can eat rice and get a massive spike.
Yes.
And so and then also, especially when you start supplementing, because I use protein shakes and things like that for my intermediary meals for speed and convenience.
Yep.
Getting the right mix to see how responsive your body to SpectraCell tests, I think, are really good inside of that. VO2 max, I think that becomes really important, especially as you age. So it's very hard to make big gains on the muscle mass side when you're, in your 40s and 50s. But it's really easy to make VO2 max gains in a relatively quick time. And that seems to be the best test for cognitive protection.
Yeah.
In other words, getting oxygen to the brain is going to make you feel good. And the key is to balance that again with your DEXA scan. Am I running too much? Am I not running enough? Am I not getting enough weight training in? Is my diet supporting my running, or is my, so I use that as an example to go back to see where you can find this divergence in what seems like a good idea, but is counterproductive.
Love it. I think I can see goalposts that people have a couple times per year. You could have a check-in that involves the DEXA, the VO2 max, whatever blood work is relevant that you're working on. And, you have goalposts. And I think that'd be very motivating for a lot of people as they're recompositioning too. I'm thinking a lot about fit mothers in our community. There's many of them as they start strength training, they are building muscle and losing fat at the same time. Body comp is changing. Scale is not that much. The DEXA would show that and it would be a huge success. The scale shows that and there's some subtle punitive stuff in there. So I love this expanded metric plan that you have.
Yeah. And then another one I would say is get something like a pulse test, which is basically showing cardiac damage inside the system. There's some other heart tests out there. I use that one. And why am I addressing those ones? Well, heart disease and diabetes and obesity are three of the biggest components that lead to death, right? And cancer, I believe, is a derivative of both of those in that if you have unregulated blood sugar and you're obese, your likelihood of cancer goes up. And so you can use that as a substandard. And then the other thing is I think the third or fourth leading cause of death is pharmaceutical enhancement. If you have one of those conditions, you're going to get prescriptions from the doctor to mitigate the decisions, or mitigate the symptoms of that disease. But they may have corollary problems that are going to get you back into the doctor and may have some suboptimal long-term outcomes. And that's the difference of having both an MD and an ND in your teamwork. So you have a counter authorities about, okay, I need to deal with this in the short term as what the MD's job is. But how am I going to mitigate the lifestyle stuff? Because many of the meds that people think they're dependent on can be completely gone off under the guidance of an ND over time with the right lifestyle and the right dietary integration. So those elements should take you out of the high risk factor into the low risk factor. And I believe those are the elements that are going to allow you to live that long, strong, healthy life that I'm envisioning for our clients and for people around the world.
Yeah. Beautifully said. All right. A couple directions here. You have had this lifelong love for lifting weights and building muscle. Has your training changed in the last 5 years or so? And has your thinking in terms of advice that you would say for people when it comes to, let's just say strength training in particular, but how you would program or the kinds of things you do? What is some of your most topical advice for people in their fifth and sixth and maybe even seventh decade of life who want to build muscle, who want to perform? And like, how do you counsel them on the exercise component?
Yeah. So early in my career, it was, as I like to say, balls to the wall kind of stuff. So you're going as hard as often as you can. You're in a continuous caloric surplus to meet the demands of growth, and everything stems around it. So either high volume or high intensity. Those are the two ways. It's not an either or for folks. Again, it's like the dietary story. You can go one or the other. As you age, your ability to hit high intensity is going to diminish significantly. So I would rather see you move, and same thing as volume. You're just not going to be able to do the volume either from a lifestyle standpoint because you got other responsibilities,
Sure.
or it's simply you can't recover from that level of volume.
Mm-hmm.
So generally what happens in the middle age is, okay, I've reached the peak of muscle mass that I'm probably going to carry in my life. Now I need to go into a protective mode. So in that case, reducing the volume, reducing the intensity, and reducing the frequency are going to be the elements. It's going to vary on individual to individual on how well these other elements are going on in your life. So now I'm much easier to give myself an off day if I've been traveling, or if I'm just not feeling my oats that day because I stayed up too late working on a spreadsheet for the company. And I'm like, I get up in the morning, I'm like, I don't have much gas. So instead of hitting the gym today, I'm going to go for a little walk down to the beach. So creating those back off elements and psychologically not beating yourself up. I'm a guy that has extremely high standards. And it's just like, and it's like, okay, I got high standards, but like, is this standard realistic for all of these other things that I want going on? And I just, it's not that I'm giving myself less. I'm backing off to give myself more.
Yeah.
So those are the elements. Going for the PRs and the low repetitions where you can get into injury. And I remember the first time this happened to me. It's a funny story. I went to the gym one day and I was feeling as good as I felt. And I'm like, it was a leg day and I'm just banging out sets and I'm feeling awesome. And I'm loading up the bar and I'm cranking it. I'm feeling like, man, I feel like I'm in my 20s again. The next day, my back's hurting. I'm in total pain. I remember calling my coach at the time, Scott at the time. This is a long time ago. And I said, dude, it's like, I thought I just smoked everything yesterday. I feel like garbage today. What's going on? He goes, let me guess. You were feeling awesome yesterday when you went on your leg routine. I said, yeah. He goes, those are the days you have to worry about when you get older, because you do go that extra mile. You push, something snaps, something goes off. So you want to, there was a fellow by the name of Bill Pearl. He wrote a great book, Keys to the Inner Universe, and another one called Beyond the Universe. And he lived an extraordinary life up into his 90s, high levels of muscularity, he's former Mr. Universe. He said, always leave the gym feeling like you could do more. And I've incorporated that into my mindset, is that, okay, you know what? I could go a little bit further, but you know what? I'm going to save a little bit more for the next day. And that mindset has allowed me to be, be able to maintain my muscle mass even in my 50s. That what I had when I was in my 30s with no TRT. And that's another element. Recognize that I'm not against TRT or hormone optimization as you get older, but separate your favorite advocate out there if they're using hormonal augmentation without communicating to you, the consumer, in the impact of that. And then also hormone supplementation is not for everybody, and there are risks associated, which are going to vary again. And you need to have the guidance of someone who's well-versed in your hormones to understand the interactions and changes that can happen if you start to augment with hormones. So I'm an advocate for it as you get older. I want to be clear about that. I think it's improved the quality of life of a lot of people, but make sure the advice that you're getting on social media has the caveat, well, that guy's doing this, this, and this. And that's the thing that bugs me the most, is I see so many, nutritional supplement promoters, or they're promoting the latest biohacking thing. They're not revealing to the consumer that they're on, 15 different drugs, which are very potent, that's leading a lot of that result or counteracting some of the short-term side effects that maybe a supplement. So you can get faulty data from social quote unquote proof.
And so people understand the effect of these things is quite massive. Like taking a high dose of TRT can be the deciding factor on why they can maintain 5-10% less body fat than you and carry more muscle as well. It's like, it is a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
Okay. I want to talk about magnesium, because this is something that BIOptimizers basically created the world-class product on. I mean, you guys decided you wanted to build the best stuff, and magnesium was an area that you really helped pave the path and added a lot of education on why people need this. So give us a little bit of you feel free also from the history of the company standpoint and how magnesium's kind of like changed in the supplement landscape, because I think that'll be interesting. You've been in the magnesium game for so long. Why people need it as well weaved into there would be really great. And I'm full support. Magnesium Breakthrough is the best product you can get. So tell us about magnesium, please.
Yeah. So going back to that whole agricultural model in the after World War II, we moved to from traditional crop rotation on our farms, which you do a 7-year crop rotation, 1 year that you would plow hemp back into the soil to reconstitute the soil, and 1 year you would let the soil, you wouldn't plant anything on it to regenerate, and then you would rotate. So maybe this year you're going to do potatoes, and next year you'll do corn, and the next year you'll do whatever. So every farm used to run by those parameters. Well, when the industrialization of America happened during the war and then post-war, what happened is most of the population began to move into cities. And that means food needed to be trucked in. Now, the regulatory agencies decided, whoa, now that so many people are moving out of agriculture and farming, we need to create standards in order to maintain that we have enough food to support the population. So this is, I'm not projecting this as some dark aspect. It's just like, okay, so let's go into monoculture farming and creating, food boards to make sure we have enough of these staples so that we can supply. And so that agency came in and the farms started to remove that old generation's plan of reconstituting the soil. Then what happened out of that is they said, well, now we have to go for the yield of products. So we can increase the yield if we add things like fertilizer. So we add nitrogen into the soil and that boosts the growth rate. What wasn't checked, maybe the technology wasn't sufficient to know that, is the faster you grow something, the weaker that plant is. It doesn't have as much minerals and vitamins and bacteria cultures. And so they started having crop failures from monoculture farming. So they were getting funguses and parasites and bacteria, like all these things. So then instead of addressing the root cause of we need to remineralize the soil and stuff, we're going to add, herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides, chemical agents to kill these entities that are destroying the crops. Then we had to make crop resistant products like genetically modified products to be resistant to the pesticides. The pesticides is disrupting the bacteria. Long story short, over the course of 70, 80 years, we get to present day when, an orange, for example, in 1950s, you would need like 55 oranges to get the same equivalent in the actual nutrients. So our caloric model was a low resolution way of looking at nutrition, not looking at nutrient yield. And I challenge anyone, go out to an Amish farm or a Mennonite farm or someone who's using heirloom seeds and go eat your favorite food, potatoes, tomatoes, cucumbers. You have one of these things and it's like, oh, I'm full. There's a satiation that happens from a very small amount of food because the nutrient density is so high. I guess I should have put that up on the longevity
but
aspect.
That
nutrient
satiation
density
is directly correlated to nutrient density for sure.
Yeah, so nutrient density. So long story short, in North America, it's almost impossible to get sufficient levels of magnesium. And I call magnesium the miracle mineral. It's involved in over 600 functions in the body. They're discovering new parameters for it every day. It's essentially a catalyst to enzyme function, to electrolyte regulation, to neurotransmitter formation, to vasodilation, the relaxation response in both your nervous system and your muscles. It's huge and its impact. And if you're deficient, what tends to happen is you are entering into what I would call a constrictive process, cramping in muscles, vasoconstriction, which reduces oxygen and blood flow, fatigue, tiredness.
Increases blood pressure, yes.
Improper flow of electrical impulses, disruption in enzymatic activity. You have over 25,000 enzymes in the body that do all different functions. They're the catalyst for everything. So basically everything starts to slow down like you don't have enough electrical juice. And when people add magnesium into their diets, what typically happens, and I've been in the industry my whole life, so 37 years I've been in the nutrition industry. I started when I was 15. And I've never seen a product that had so many corollary, like, hey, this worked for this and this worked for this. So everything from sleep regulation, constipation, PMS pain, vasodilation, heart components, blood sugar regulation. We're seeing these results with magnesium. And I always say, it's not that magnesium is so great. It's that we're so deficient in magnesium. The other element is in a highly electromagnetic pollution area with all these blue lights and all this Wi-Fi, it seems that there is an increased requirement for the needs of magnesium because of the stimulatory effects on our bodies. And there is also a genetic variance to that. So some people are much more susceptible to Wi-Fi stimulation and electromagnetic pollution than others. And knowing where you are on that scale is going to be helpful in regulating it. And so when I discovered this, and literally I burned myself out from working 3 different companies and burning the candle at both ends, so to speak, and using stimulants and stuff to keep myself going, which were all exhausting. By the way, caffeine reduces the absorption of magnesium. And so when I did some testing, I did an EEG. My brain looked like it was a brain of a 7-year-old. It felt like that. And my SpectraCell test said that I wasn't getting enough magnesium. I'm like, I'm supplementing with magnesium. How's that possible? And so that led Matt and I to go on a deep dive in magnesium world. And turned out for him, Matt always struggled with sleep. And magnesium was a big advancement in his sleep cycle and his sleep routine. And for me, it was a big regulation in reducing my genetic proclivity to be overstimulated from caffeine. Mm-hmm. I like caffeine, but if I drink too much of it, it doesn't do well for me. So I had to find a mitigation result. And so we started experimenting with all the different magnesiums were out there to see which one was best. We have a lab in Bosnia that can test all this stuff. We do the InfoGest, which is the gold standard for determining how something digests. We have specialized microscopes. It costs us a lot of money, so we can see if is it going into the cells, how bioactive the raw ingredients are, because there's a big variance between the quality of these elements, and then what composite of these elements would actually produce the best result. And that's where we led that there was not one single magnesium that actually solved all the problems. It was much better to do a composite of various types of magnesiums that we would get an overall general uptake better and a proliferation of the anecdotal references that came back for what this magnesium did. We have theories around why that might be. That's very hard to prove, but what we can say is most people who have tried magnesium or haven't tried magnesium, when they try magnesium breakthrough and put it against other components, they can actually feel the difference and see it in a qualitative aspect of their life. And so we do all of our testing with our lab. We have 20 PhDs and master students who are literally doing experiments every day on how effective we can make our products, how more effective we can make it, how we can use better raw ingredients, etc., and how we can combine things that they actually work as opposed to a bunch of theories and opinions.
That's awesome. When do you take your magnesium? Do you have a particular time of day that you take magnesium breakthrough?
Yeah, I take it usually once in the morning and then once before bed. And the reason I take it once in the morning is because, oftentimes I come in and I make myself a stimulatory beverage. And I want to make sure that I'm not taking out all the magnesium out of my diet. And of course, I sweat a lot and I train a lot. And I have high levels of requirements for magnesium in my diet. So I make sure that I take about 3 caps a day now. So.
Nice. And can you highlight some magnesium-rich foods? I know they're going to be deficient from a standpoint of what might have been 100 years ago, but are there some foods that you counsel people to focus on or add into their diet?
Yeah, well, I think the first indication that you might be low in magnesium is cravings for chocolate. Chocolate is very high in magnesium. Avocados, all your nuts and seeds, bananas. The thing about bananas, most of them are gas ripened, so you don't get oftentimes the higher quality that you would get if you were eating it in a local environment. Leafy grains, tofu, and legumes. Now, interesting enough, all of those things are in my diet.
Me too, pretty much.
And I wasn't getting and I wasn't getting enough magnesium sufficient to my needs.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, again, I'm pushing it, doing saunas and doing, whole cat machine, sweating a couple times a day, hitting the gym, all that sort of stuff. And then using stimulation, like, caffeinated beverages and nootropics and things like that in order to get my, keep at the high level. So I'm exhausting magnesium, and I'm in Venice Beach, California. So it's like I'm surrounded in a pool of electromagnetic pollution.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that was really certainly very informative. I have a final direction I want to take this, and I want to speak to you as a parent, dad to dad. You have a son, and you're going to be taking a lot of your knowledge that you've developed over the years and gained, and transmitting that into a parenting and family culture that he thrives in. What kind of advice do you have for parents who want to raise healthy and robust kids? And that can be pulling in some of the stuff we talked about today. It could be specific nutrient recommendations. Should parents be giving their kids a multivitamin? What's the case on like screen time, getting outside? Like however you want to approach that, I guess, being a fit father yourself, like how do you translate that culture into your family?
Yeah. Number one, you got to be conscientiously creating that culture. In other words, I have a lot of friends who have had kids that are older now, and they've gone through this process. And the ones that have been successful have created an identity around nutrition in their day and exercise in their day and earning their screen time versus just having their screen time.
Okay.
So I'm not taking screen time away, but you earn it through exercise. In other words, we got to have so many hours outside to get so many hours inside.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is seeing the parents taking vitamins and supplements and being conscientious around the dude, sharing with them. Kids are very pliable, and sharing with them the value of healthy foods and how that makes them smart and strong and lots of energy, and how if they're sick, these integrations can help them get healthier, because kids are very motivated and they're very pliable. If you can get them in those earlier years, and the ones that I know that have been doing that in the early years, it's much easier in the later years. That being said, if you're starting out now and your kids are a little bit older, setting the standards for your own physical fitness and what you're doing around it will influence them. Your kids are watching you. And so if all of a sudden they see dad is, he's making a point of hydrating every day. They see him taking, a protein shake a couple times a day instead of going to the Burger King. They see him making a salad instead of ordering in for pizza. Well, and all of a sudden you lose 10, 15, 20 pounds. They're proud of their father for making those adjustments, and they start to mimic and imitate those things around the culture. That's the culture that you've created in your house. And they're more than happy to go out and start sharing that and building it as part of their identity, is that we're a healthy family. We exercise every day. We love eating healthy. We love feeling good and feeling strong. And we earn everything that we get. So you don't get the screen time if you haven't done the physical work or done, your nutritional homework. And then also another thing that I've impacted a number of father friends of mine is doing an old Scott Abel thing about, okay, here's the one day a week that's your day to kind of have the fun foods. And that way I don't demonize bad foods. I don't get an unhealthy relationship with, the niceties of life. I mean, the reason why people go eat ice cream, pizza, French fries, burgers, it tastes good. It's awesome. I do it myself. I do that in a controlled environment, saying, okay, Saturday, spike day. What are we going to have for Saturday? So we have that delayed gratification. We don't have ice cream on Tuesdays, but on Saturday, if we hit all our goals, we'll go for ice cream on Saturday. So you're setting that up. It's a special occasion, not a daily occasion. And again, that creates that environment that's helpful. And so that's what we're attempting to do with our child. And we'll see how it turns out over the long run. But I know my friends who I've helped coach around that seems to be the success standard.
Super helpful. I appreciate that a lot as a nice button to this conversation. And I'll say, if anyone's inspired by this, they can go to BIOptimizers.com. And at checkout, you can use our code FITFAMILY for some special discounts and gifts that you include for our listeners. So, Wade, thank you for being a partner and a part of this community and a huge health advocate. I appreciate you coming on today, and I want to leave it to you one more time for any closing thoughts or words of wisdom for our fit fathers and fit mothers who are listening.
Yeah, we're on the edge of the greatest cultural change around fitness and health that has ever occurred in our entire lifetimes. Right now, the technology exists for all of humanity to live stronger and longer than ever before. The availability of experts such as yourself has never been easier to get really solid counseling about what you need to do and how you need to do it, and to find supportive communities around it. I think that the next 50 years is going to transform human health and human performance for a select group of people, the people that take the time and energy to do that. The downside is if you don't, you'll probably go where everyone else is, which is decreased life expectancy, an increased disability adjusted life expectancy, and a premature death, and a very painful route. So the choice has never been clear. We're at a fork in the road. And I would say that taking the fork upwards to this new paradigm of health, which is emerging here in America, is going to lead the way in this. I think that it is the most exciting time to be in this. It's never been a better time. Feeling great is always the best medicine. And if I could share with people, like, the quality of life that I experience on a day-to-day basis, and the people in my sphere of influence who are in their 50s and 60s and beyond, we feel great and we're able to perform at the highest levels at an age where most people think we're slowing down. We're not slowing down, I'm calming down. And the idea is that we can move this paradigm forward so that we can have productive, healthy, functional senior citizens, not go off to the home and catch a retirement and sit on a beach. I'm talking about living strong and being excited about contributing to the future. That's where we're going. We're excited about it. And BIOptimizers is doing our part on that process. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Phenomenal. I'm pumped up. I got some chills on that. Thank you so much, Wade. And thank you everyone who's tuned in today to this amazing conversation. And we'll see you back here next time. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Fit Father Project podcast. If you love what you heard, please rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts. It really helps spread this show to more men who need this valuable info. To watch full video episodes of this podcast and other motivational videos to inspire your training and more, visit our Fit Father Project YouTube channel. It's free and everything's made for busy guys over 40 like you. Visit youtube.com/Fit Father Project to get access to our entire video library. And finally, if you or someone in your life is interested in becoming a fit father or needs help losing weight, building muscle, and living healthier after age 40, then visit fitfatherproject.com, where you can see our proven programs, supplement line for guys 40 plus, and free meal plan and workouts to get you started. This is Dr. Anthony Balduzzi signing off. I'll see you in the next episode.